Dr. Omar Qureshi, currently the Director of Integrated Curriculum at Yaqeen Institute, is another project member who we heard from in episode 1. He takes the theological discussion further, pointing out the very special place humans take in the Qur'anic account of creation.
The word human, it refers to what we would call the genealogical descendants of Adam and Eve. We consider Adam to be a special creation of God, and importantly here, Adam would be the first human to be created by God. As Muslims, we do believe that Adam and Eve were real historical persons and the progenitor of all humans. We would say that Adam was distinguished from, for example, the angels and other beings by his unique abilities. In the Quran, it talks about Adam's ability to name things, right? So Adam is the one who God taught all the names to, right? And the angels were unable to provide the names of objects. So this ability to name things, right, name objects, is something that is very important in the theological conception of human beings, right? So language is there, definitely. And also, there are certain advanced cognitive faculties, right, rational capacities and reasonings that human beings are able to do, which distinguish them from what we call non-human animals. And the human person is considered a union of body and soul. Theologically speaking, here, the doctrine is that humans are the most superior and noble of God's creation, right? And this is based on many verses of the Quran, where God says that verily we have honored the children of Adam, and some of the blessings that God has given them, he mentions that in the Quran as and borne them on land and sea, and provided them of good, wholesome things, and greatly favored them over a multitude of those we have created. So here is showing the place of human beings in God's creation. And there are other verses that speak to the place of human beings within God's creation. Now, when it gets to the issue of human origins, here the Quran speaks quite a lot about that, actually. And the doctrine here is that humans are created from what's in Arabic is called turab, or dust. And all human beings do trace their lineage back to the first human, which is Adam. And so this doctrine here of Adam being the first human is something that there is scholarly consensus on in the Islamic tradition. In addition to that, the human beings have what's called a perfect physical form. So the actual physical form is something that is spoken about in the Quran, and it is, like, for example, in Surah 95, or chapter 95, verse 4, God says that verily we have created man, here human beings, in the best, most beautiful conformation, right? So there's an idea of the word that's used as ahsan, which does incorporate this concept of beauty. So even the human form is considered beautiful.
وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ وَحَمَلْنَاهُمْ فِي الْبَرِّ وَالْبَحْرِ ورزقناهم من الطيبات وفضلناهم على كثير ممن خلقنا تفضيلا.
We have honored the children of Adam and carried them by land and sea. We have provided good sustenance for them and favored them, especially above many of those we have created.
And we'll explore the essential nature of human beings in the next episode. But coming back to our origins, Dr. Qureshi explains more about the scholarly consensus on this question within the Sunni tradition.
Scholarly consensus is the agreement of every scholar of the Muslim community who is qualified to directly and independently interpret the sources of revealed law during any time period on any issue. And the knowledge yielded by scholarly consensus is vouchsafed by God from any error by virtue of the divine grace it has received. One in particular is documented by the 13th century scholar Ali ibn al-Qattan, and here he documents the following doctrine, which is that the Muslims are in agreement that God distinguished Adam from other prophets, and he states in 3 ways at least. One is that in that God created him with his hands, he commanded the angels to prostrate to him, and made him the father of mankind, all of them, I mean, each and every human. So it seems like in light of this transmitted proof, this scholarly consensus, any interpretation of the Quran that allows for the possibility of non-Adamic humans is excluded. regarding the doctrine of human exceptionalism, I think there's some other considerations. This position assumes the mechanisms of natural selection and random mutations adequately explain diversity of life on Earth. So, in my mind, a satisfactory case has not been made that we can conclusively hold to any of these positions. And so, in my opinion, these are not, very compatible with the Sunni theological tradition.
We just heard Dr. Qureshi referencing scholarly consensus on the position that the Prophet Adam was the progenitor of all humankind and a special creation of God. This scholarly consensus accords a high degree of epistemic weight to the position, which itself is based on Qur'anic sources. He further notes that the view of non-Adamic humans is excluded based on scholarly consensus from the 13th century forward. He also seems to suggest Islamic theologians and Muslim scientists need not be boxed into the categories of human and Adamic exceptionalism, because those categories come with other assumptions, such as the mechanisms of natural selection and random mutation explaining how non-human life came about. Professor Malik, however, believes we need to open up other possibilities based on his reading of science and scripture.
As a Sunni Muslim, I do believe in the possibility of miracles. So I am very much against the no exceptions camp. I think that's skewing the text to a large degree, which I take quite seriously. But theologically speaking, I am indifferent to creationism, human exceptionism, and Adamic exceptionism. And the reason is because scripture itself does not give me any pull either way. What I am simply committed to is that Adam and Eve were real historical figures, that they were created miraculously, and we have a lineage that traces to them. But, does scripture talk about natural selection? Nope. So anything that is absent in scripture is not a point of creed or doctrine. So for me, theologically, creationism, human exception, and Adamic exceptionism are all open possibilities. Now, given evolution, which one makes the most sense? Adamic exceptionism. I have a feeling that it solves a lot of issues. But I understand that some people may be very wary with this proposal, simply because I think it's very new. There's a lot of resistance to this because it actually entertains evolution, which for a lot of people means you're entertaining atheism or naturalism. But if you peel away atheism and you simply say, perhaps this is a process that God himself established, no biggie, right? So for me personally, I'm open to all three: creationism, human exception, and Adamic exceptionism. And I do believe that Adamic exceptionism makes the most sense given evolution.
To recap the four main positions in broad strokes, we first encountered creationism, which posits that all life was created by God, each in its own unique form, thereby ruling out an evolutionary account of speciation and of human origin. The second category is human exceptionalism. This is a partial acceptance of an evolutionary account of living creatures other than humans, meaning that apart from Adam and Eve and their descendants, every other living form is part of the evolutionary account. Importantly, this view holds that humanity originates with Adam and Eve, that there are no other ancestors. The third position, Adamic exceptionalism, is another partial acceptance of neo-Darwinian evolution. It is the idea that non-humans and humans are a product of evolution, but only Adam is an exception to that process. And this theory is open to the idea that there might have been other humanoid creatures, or indeed full humans, existing prior to Adam or concomitantly with Adam. The fourth position, colloquially termed no exceptions, is full acceptance of the evolutionary account, in which all living beings are understood to have emerged through the process of evolution. In the no exceptions position, there are various understandings of Adam and Eve, including some proponents of this position who adopt a metaphorical interpretation of Adam and Eve. Our primary focus in this discussion will be on the two middle positions, human and Adamic exceptionalism. Specifically, how do we find balance between scriptural accounts of human origin and the bioscientific accounts we just heard in the first part of this episode? It may be helpful to start with an example of possible interpretations of Scripture regarding one particular concept that underpins the evolutionary narrative, the notion of deep time. The concept of deep time essentially means that evolution occurred over a vast temporal scale. And it's crucial because the idea of natural selection, which is the process by which evolution occurs and leads to speciation, depends on there being sufficient time for it to take place. Dr. Omar Qureshi explains how the concept of deep time can be reconciled with Islamic scriptures.
So from the early period, the companions of the Prophet Muhammad, you see a large discussion on Yom. Yom can be interpreted as the 24-hour period, and pretty much the standard literal meaning of that word. At the same time, one finds in the Quran the word Yom being used, and God saying that one day of yours is like 1,000 days with God. So this led scholars to say, well, yes, in certain cases the word Yom, day, could refer to a 24-hour period. In other contexts it can refer to 1,000-year time period, even more than 1,000 years. And then what you find is kind of a third understanding, which is Yom, in many of these verses, refers to undefined time period. So many scholars say when these verses talk about the 6 days of creation, it refers to the 6 stages of creation, not referring to 24 hours nor referring to 1,000 years, but just a undefined time period. So when it comes to looking at the issue of deep time, understanding the nature of the history of the universe and life on Earth, one can definitely find valid interpretations that are aligned with this concept of deep time.
وَإِنَّ يَوْمًا عِندَ رَبِّكَ كَأَلْفِ سَنَةٍ مِّمَّا تَعُدُّونَ.
But a day with your Lord is indeed like 1,000 years by your counting.
We've just heard a perspective from Dr. Qureshi on how a range of interpretations can be brought to scriptural sources on scientific questions, like the age of the earth and the time span of the appearance of living organisms. When it comes to the mechanisms proposed by evolutionary theory, there is a little more complexity in assessing the weight of various claims. Dr. Qureshi gives us an example of assessing microevolution and macroevolution using both scientific and Islamic frameworks.